Okay, yes, it's recorded now. Okay, thank you. Thank you for reminding me indeed. So temperature is basically something that is controlled by homeostasis. And and what happened that human body has a temperature of approximately 37 degrees centigrade um, uh, at we can say on average. But what happened that mostly our temperature varies from +1 and -1. Like it may be in the morning we just get up, it may be 36 degrees or 36.5 degrees. And when you are actively participating in some activity or you're working or you're doing something actively, then it may go up to approximately like 1 degree up, like 38 degrees or so, or maybe 37.5 or so. So that it is controlled in a range. Homeostasis does not mean that there will be an exact certain point on which it has to be set, like 37 degrees. But on average, this is 37 degrees. So temperature has to be set at a particular point. So what's the reason for this homeostasis? The major reason is basically to keep our body functioning at a particular level because our enzymes are active at a particular temperature. Then, second important point is this that our proteins, which are making everything in our body, both structural and functional, we should say, they work better on a particular temperature. Working right. The proteins which are making our structures and function in the body, they actually work better at a particular temperature. For example, our structural proteins, they are having a particular configuration. They have a particular shape when they have to perform their function at the normal level. So if we are uh, having those, we have to keep the structures intact. Then the temperature also has to be set. If temperature is much higher, much lower, then this may damage the proteins or this may damage the function or any structure like that. For example, you have heard of this: if temperature is too high, agar bukhar, fever, which we call it, that is I mean above 99 degrees or so, basically. So if we say that fever is too high, then it can damage the brain cells. Why? Because this will result in dysfunction of many proteins and also the structural formations, which we normally call 3D structures, will also be we can say bonds will be broken down, and the result will be distortion of different types of proteins possible. Even at very low temperatures, the same thing may happen. That temperature might be we can say distorted, particularly the 3D and 4D structures. So that's why temperature has to be temperature has to be regulated very well. So this is important that temperature should be regulated very well. So temperature regulation becomes very important phenomenon in this way. That's why it is maintained by a homeostasis. Now let's try to relate it to the environment. What happened that when we have to relate this to the environment, any organism, let's just not talk about human being, any organism is living in a particular surrounding. It's not living in isolation. So we can also say that or animal or humans and animals are not living in isolation. They are, if we talk about the surroundings of a human being, for example, if I am sitting on a bench, right? If a person, for example, sitting in a park on a bench, then what the surroundings do have? Who's gonna tell me? Let's see. Human person is sitting in a park on a bench. What are the surroundings? What are the things that could be around the person? Please, someone,
Ma'am.
someone will tell me.
Trees, insects, pets,
Trees, yes.
insects.
Grass,
Yes,
yes,
ma'am.
of course. Bench itself. If you are sitting on a bench, you are in contact, direct contact with the bench, right? The sunlight, the grass down there, soil. If some animals are around, right? So
Yes.
just have a look. See, one person is just sitting on a bench. One is direct contact. This is sitting on a bench, touching the bench. Bench may be hot, bench may be cold, bench may be slightly warm. Then air around the person. Air has its own temperature. It may be cold, or we can say, if a wind is blowing, that may be more colder. If this is pure sunlight, then it may be less colder. If sun is shining, then sunlight has its own effect. It's we are here talking about like physical surroundings. So how much humidity is there in the air? Then the person is putting their feet on ground, probably the soil, the grass. Okay, then biological surroundings. We talk about the grass. If there are trees, if you're sitting just inside a few trees, you have 4 or 5 trees or plants around, then the temperature will be a bit lower. Right? Then, if some animals are there in the surrounding, their body is actually ready. Any every human or animal body who are standing or sitting or there in a place, they actually raises the temperature slightly higher. That's why a room full of people will have a higher temperature. A room empty with just 1 or 2 persons, temperature will be lower. So human and animal bodies are also radiating heat. So human or animal, all of these things are actually adding to the temperature environment in which a person is living. We call this the environmental temperature, the ambient temperature. Or sometimes we refer to as TA. TA stands for ambient temperature. Look at this TA. TA means the ambient temperature. Let's highlight it. The TA. TA means temperature, A for ambient, the environmental temperature. Then temperature of the person or the body. This is called TB. TB is TB is body temperature, temperature of a living body, animal, human, whoever. So TA versus TB. TA is affecting TB and TB is also affecting TA. Like for example, I have said if many people are sitting in a room, if we are sitting, say 100 people in a small room, then the temperature will be higher. If in the same sized room, 2 or 3 people are sitting, temperature will be lower. So ambient temperature is affecting the body temperature and body temperature is also affecting the ambient temperature. So these two important terms. Then we also need to talk about the so what point I'm making here, that humans are or and animals also are not living in isolation. They are living in a particular environment, and we call this environment. We can name it. We say that this is called the thermal environment, or we can also say that like thermal part of the environment. So the thermal part of the environment. That is, environment is also having many factors, but one of those physical factors is the temperature. That it is there inside the air due to sunlight, due to wind blowing, due to humidity, due to presence of animals, due to presence of humans, due to presence of plants, due to presence of trees. That's why we say that these days, particularly in larger cities like Lahore, let's take example of our own city. Let's take in Lahore. That what happens that yeah, due to so many structures which are formed, overheads and bridges and underpasses and there are so many structures, and though there is so much reduction in the trees and plants, this actually causes the reduction, the increase in temperature, at least 1 to 2 degrees in the environment. So the environmental effect upon the body of humans and animals is actually changed, and changed a lot. We can say that someone was just sharing some research that if there are many trees, if there is a road which is surrounded by trees, then temperature might be 10 to 20 degrees down at a particular time. And it's a very hot time, even 2 3 degrees down, the temperature could be down 2 to 3 degrees. So if there are lesser trees, then this temperature can rise up. And even with these cemented structures, ये जो underpasses हैं, bridges हैं, इनकी वजह से क्या हो सकता है कि और भी rise up हो सकता है. Because what happens that when sunlight is there, they can absorb a lot of heat and of course they will radiate it later to the environment. When the environment become colder in the evening, they will radiate that heat towards the environment. So this is about thermal environment. Now let's go to the next phenomenon which is related to that. That how the heat is transferred from one body, we can say, to another body. That body could be human body, that could be a bench, that could be a tree, that could be the road. So let's road and then go ahead. Okay, so methods of heat transfer. How heat is transferred between the we can say different things. This is simple, not simple actually, but this is a lot of physics. So, if but we are talking about the heat transfer method from animal or human environment. Remember, in human and animal body will be the same, because what will happen that same for human and animal body. So when we are talking about humans, we are actually talking same in animals. So there are three main methods of heat transfer. So one is conduction, second is convection, and third is radiation. Conduction is basically the method of heat transfer. Um, just a minute. So conduction is the method of heat transfer. Just let me write it down, definitions for you, and then I can elaborate on this. Okay. So there are three main ways in which heat is transferred, particularly if we are talking about humans or animals. One is conduction. That is, heat transfers from a solid object to another solid object. For example, um, human to bench. If a person is sitting, we talked about that a person is sitting on a bench, right? Now, if person is sitting on a bench, then heat will be transferred from the human's body to the bench, and from bench to the human body. If you simply uh, if you simply sit on a wooden bench, then there will be lesser heat transfer because this is another kind of material. If you just simply sit on a rock which is just there in the sunlight, then it may be hotter. If you are sitting on a bench or a rock which was of just very much in the morning, when there is no sunlight, and sun is just arriving, sun is just rising, then you can feel that it is colder. Now, what will happen? That all heat or any kind of heat transfer happen against the concentration gradient. So heat transfer will be from area of higher concentration to the lower concentration. So what will happen? That heat will be transferred from its area of higher concentration to its area of lower concentration. So heat transfer will be from area of higher concentration to the area of lower concentration. So if human body is warmer, like in the morning, bench is colder, then heat transfer will be from your body to the bench. So थोड़ी देर में क्या होगा? If you're sitting, your body become cold. If you put your hand on a bench which is colder than your hand, then heat will be transferred from your hand to the bench. So this is the heat transfer between objects. For example, at night when we are sleeping and there is too much cold outside, then how our body respond? We curl. सो रहे होते हैं और अगर आपकी मॉम आकर देखें कि यू आर कर्लिंग राउंड, आप कर्ल करके लेटे हुए हो, तो वो क्या करती हैं, आपके ऊपर कोई चादर वादर, कोई ब्लैंकेट या कोई चीज दे देती है. वाई? बिकॉज ही आपको ठंड लग रही है. ठंड क्यों लग रही है? वाई यू आर एक्चुअली फीलिंग दैट? बिकॉज हीट इज ट्रांसफर्ड फ्रॉम योर बॉडी टू आउटसाइड, and your body, it responds, you know um, this is called, we say, behavioral modification, a behavioral adaptation. What your body is doing when it is curling around, when you are curled, your arms, your legs, all are closer to your main trunk of the body. So the heat transfer is actually happening from your one body part to another body. So if your arms are close to each other, almost attached to each other, then heat will be transferred from arm to arm and less to the environment. And same thing happens. So when your hand is touching hand, then heat will be transferred between hands and will not be transferred to the environment. So this is heat transfer from solid object to another solid object. Now convection is heat transfer from, there is a slight, I say, variation in definition of convection in various places, but still I'm talking about which is the most agreed upon, that heat transfer from a liquid to liquid object or liquid to solid object. For example, if you're putting your hand in water, if water is warmer, heat will be moving towards your hand. If your water is colder, then heat will be transferred from hand to the water. This applies more to the organisms, animals which are living inside the water. As humans are not doing so, so it's less applied to humans anyway. But for example, fishes, it's important mechanism for them. Then comes the other important mechanism, the radiation. Radiation is basically heat transfer from solid to gas phase, or maybe air. You can say, for example, like if we are sitting in a colder environment, then our body will be radiating heat towards the environment. That is releasing our heat outside. If outside is warmer, then our body is actually gaining that heat. So I said vice versa. So heat transfer from a solid object to a gaseous phase or the air and back. So both are possible. Now, what happened that all these three mechanisms are responsible for most of the heat transfers from okay uh, basically causing the heat transfer from area of higher concentration to the area of lower concentration. That would be the normal uh, heat transfer among different organisms. So these are the methods of heat transfer. Normally heat is transferred like this, and this ultimately uh, decide the relationships of human body with their external environment. Um, and then comes the internal management of those temperatures. So let's now talk about the next thing, and we'll just define it today because I got late. We got more than 5 less minutes than normal time. In 10 minutes we can talk few things, but not in the detail. So I just briefly talk about that how we define different organisms based upon their temperatures. How they are actually managing their temperature. So let's erase this board. All right. So all right. So human beings are called endotherms sometimes. There are more terms, and we have to talk about them. We are just defining them. Okay, so there are few terms that are used in relation with how different organisms manage their body temperature. So one way is this. One the older terms first we talk about the homeotherms and the heterotherms or the poikilotherms. Now what happened that the homeotherms, homeo means same, therm means temperature, who are having same type of temperature almost all the time. Then poikilotherm, poikilo means changeable, changing, or heterotherms. Hetero means different, change. So heterotherm which are having different temperatures. So homeotherms are those organisms defined as wild like human beings who have similar same type of temperature all the time. Poikilotherms or heterotherms are those which have changeable temperatures. So these were the older terms which were commonly used um, in quite an older time for different animals and human beings to define them. Like for example, human beings were said to be homeotherms because we are having our temperature, body temperature, TB. Now I refer to TB, the body temperature. TB, which is generally almost same all the time. 1 or 2 degrees variation may be there. There are more animals, like for example, if we talk about the fishes. Okay, so if we talk about the fishes, what happened that they may have their temperature changed all the time. So it may be 10 degrees low. At one point they are having 25 degrees, and at one point they are having 15 degrees. There may be huge variation. So human beings who are having that regular temperature will be called homeotherms, and the other ones which are changing their temperature may be called poikilotherms. Poikilo means who can change it, And the fish we are talking about will be called a poikilotherm, which is having variable temperature, or maybe heterotherm because temperature is changed a lot. Right? But these terms are sometimes not appropriate because what happened that even homeotherms are not having exactly the same temperature all the time. Like human body temperature is 37 degrees on average, but it may be 38, it may be 36 at times, as we talked about previously. So some people then devised the new terms. They said that we should talk about ectotherm and endotherm. They say ectotherm means who are actually taking their heat in their body or use external heat sources to change the temperature of the body. For example, a lizard is sitting in the sunlight. So we see lizards are generally sitting in the sunlight, and they are getting that, and of course they are getting warmed up because their temperature they cannot regulate their temperature very well. So they need heat for helping. Human beings, we also bask in the sun, but we do not exactly need that because our body is actually managing the temperature from inside mechanisms as well. Like for example, shivering. If the temperature is too cold, by shivering, body actually increases its heat because high muscular movements. So we can do that. The second term is endotherm. Now, endotherm means endo means internal, therm means temperature. It means that these are the organisms which can actually um, increase their body temperature or decrease it by internal mechanisms, mechanisms by internal parts of the body. So these two terms are also related and still they are used. Now we have more terms which are most modern terms: regulators and conformers.
Ma'am, are endotherm and homeotherms same or similar?
Homeotherms, yes, endotherms and homeotherms are closer, we can say. Not exactly the same terms, but closer term. Like a homeotherm could be endotherm or sometimes could be ectotherm. Even there are certain organisms, for example, which are living in an environment where temperature is almost uh, at the same level all the year. They will be homeotherms, but ectotherms, right? So mostly homeotherms are endotherms and mostly heterotherms are ectotherms. But this is all not always the case. For example, अगर एक fish ऐसी जगह पे रह रही है जहाँ temperature almost एक जैसा ही रहता है तो उसका temperature भी change नहीं होगा, right? So it could be variation. So इसकी ये भी variation होती है. Now ultimately, the scientists are using these two terms. You can see regulators and conformers. You remember in central themes we talked about conformity and regulation, right? Now what happened? That we actually define organisms and divide organisms into two types of organisms. And human beings are the first type, so the regulators. The regulators are those which actually regulate their temperature, body temperature. Regulate by internal mechanisms. And conformers are those which do not regulate by internal mechanisms. What I did. Okay. Those do not by internal mechanisms.
So why not just use the term?
Yes, right.
Why don't they just use the term ectotherm and endotherm?
Yeah, why they have changed it? Though these terms are still used and are still valid, because what happened that some organisms actually they are essentially using mainly external heat to heat their bodies up, like lizards, for example. But what happened that human beings are also having certain act of external sources to do that. For example, we wear heavy clothes, सर्दियों हम जैकेट वगैरह पहन लेते हैं. So this is a behavioral mechanism, external source, right? But human beings are essentially homeotherms. तो इस जगह पे जाके ये टर्म्स थोड़ी सी कंफ्यूजिंग हो जाती है। ये टर्म्स हम अभी भी यूज करते हैं, बट interchangeably. Some ectotherms could also be endotherms. Some endotherms could also be ectotherms, and some are both. Like human beings can also use basking in the sun. सर्दी में हम धूप सेकते हैं, right? We go on the top. We use sunlight, do get sunlight, and we also wear on have cloths. Animals also go into the shades or the, for example, some fishes. If temperature is too low, though they are otherwise heterotherms, their temperature become low by 10 degrees, by 15 degrees. Fishes can still stay because they can reduce their body temperature down to that level, and they can survive. Now, why they are able to do so? This is important for us because they are having their enzymes in the proteins and structural and functional proteins functional at that temperature. What will happen that in a certain other organisms, if temperature becomes that low inside their body, जैसे human body है, body के अंदर इतना low temperature हो जाए, तो their enzymes will not be functional, and the structural proteins will also be modified. Now, these organisms are having capability that at lower temperatures they can sustain their enzymes, their functionality, and also their structure. Right. So this should be there. So this is also again related to the structural and functional proteins. That will they be still functional at a lower temperature or at a higher temperature or not? If they are not, then they will have to maintain. Now, what happens that sometimes those fishes also have that mechanism that they do not reduce their temperature. They migrate. You heard of Siberian fishes and who migrate from those colder areas. So if area is very cold, they will migrate. Human beings, of course, are very different types of organisms who cannot do that. So what they also do behavior because generally we are endotherms. We produce our own heat, but we take external help, like we bask in the sun. We wear the heavy clothes. Now clothes are another external support. The actor. So at that point, these terms will become confusing. So some people say that decide in another classification, that is regulators who are regulating, conformers who are not regulating. Though again, we said that not regulating is not a right term because they are regulating, but they are regulating in a wider range. Right now, I'm writing it again, which is the ultimate end result of all of this. And then we'll close this discussion here. That regulate by internal mechanism and also using external mechanism in a narrow range. And these ones who are conformers, actually, they have a wider range. So now regulators are those precisely which maintain the temperature homeostasis in a narrow range, mostly by internal mechanisms, but also use external mechanism like human beings. Like what we do, we maintain a narrow range. Like I said, the 37 degrees is normal temperature, but +1 and +2 is possible. And to maintain that, we have internal mechanism, but still we have to wear heavy clothes. Still we will keep ourselves in, like, insides, maybe go out for basking in the sun and so on. And those who are conformers, like some fishes, not all, but some fishes who, for example, will be exposed to very low temperature or very high temperature. But they can maintain that they can actually change their temperature to much wider range. For example, if average temperature is 20 degrees in their inside, if environmental temperature drops to 10 degrees, they will drop their temperature by 10 degrees. If it is going up to 35 degrees, they can increase it up to 35 degrees, and they can still survive. So they can actually maintain their temperature in a wider range. But if it becomes lower than that, their particular range for that species, like below 10 degrees, then what will happen? Either they will have to migrate or they will not be able to survive. Otherwise, they will die. If it is like 5 degrees or so and their proteins are not functional at that, then they will not be able to survive. The body will not be able to survive and they will die. Otherwise, they will have to migrate. So many of them migrates Or like, for example, Siberian fishes also migrate and comes here. In like my Siberian birds, they also migrate for the winter season or so. So regulators regulate in a narrow range, but conformers, they regulate or do not regulate much, but whenever needed, generally regulate by external mechanisms or behavioral mechanisms in a wider range. That's the main difference. So mostly here, most of the physiologists, they agree. So regulators will regulate by internal mechanism mainly, but also use behavioral in a narrow range. But the conformers, they will have a wider range, and they generally do not regulate by internal mechanisms, and will almost most of the time use external mechanisms or behavioral mechanisms to deal with the temperature, but they still can survive. ये तो देखे ना 20 degrees हमने plus minus 10 degrees approximately they can survive. But regulators, they have to maintain in plus minus 1 degree, 1 to 2 degrees, for example. Now, how they do it, we will talk about it in next class. बहुत सारे concept आज हमने discuss किए. So I'm closing this discussion here and open for your questions. So I stop sharing this board.
Ma'am, can confirm never regulate internally?
Conformers, it is said that mostly they do not. But I
So what?
believe that there are a few which are having mostly they are not having such mechanisms. Like for example, brown fat is not present in there mostly, but some of them can use muscular movements to produce some heat, but much less than in comparison to regulators. Their main mechanism should be external, like
Okay.
behavioral migration, basking in the sun, going towards a more hotter. Like agar a fish is living in a lower part of the water body, say in the river, in a pond, living in lower part, lower part or bottom. So in bottom, it will be much less warmer. So it can come up to the surface for some time to actually, gain more heat. So this is possible.
So they have to like mentally actually try to maintain their temperature while our body just does it.
Behaviorally, we can say yes, yes. Mentally, कह सकते हैं. Behaviorally, कह सकते हैं yes. By behavior, but they are not having precise internal mechanism to do it. That's the
Okay.
issue. And the physiological, the biological reason is this, that their proteins, their enzymes are functional at that temperature too, at very low, for example -5 degrees. और हमारी बॉडी का, ह्यूमन बॉडी का -5 डिग्री हो जाए तो हमारी बहुत सारी चीजें फंक्शनल नहीं रहेंगी, उनकी रह सकती हैं. So they are having the capability to do it. Same goes for rising the temperature. Like if it is plus 10 degrees for humans, survival is not possible because brain cells will be damaged. 104 से ऊपर भी फीवर चला जाता है तो कहते हैं अभी आप वो पट्टियां वट्टियां लगाना शुरू कर दें, because brain cells will damage, because proteins will be distorted, their structures will be changed, and of course they will be uh, exact term मेरे ज़हन में नहीं आ रही. Structure distortion के लिए एक term use होती है. I'm not just getting to that. So this will happen. G.
Okay.
Yes. Anything else? Someone also want to ask something? Nothing? Okay. So we close the discussion, and in next class we will continue. Miss Ba is saying it is recorded. It is recorded. I have recorded that all, so you can see that later. I think we could save the board, but we didn't. I think I forgot to save the board. But still, board will be visible in our recording. So don't worry. You will be able to see that later. I have tried to upload some recordings. You just check and tell me if you are able to see those or not. All right, so I have taken your attendance. G. Yes,
Could
Abhi.
you test syllabus again?
Syllabus for the quiz.
Yes, ma'am.
That was a resting membrane potential, action potential, and myelination. Three things. Resting membrane potential, action potential, and myelination.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? Nope.
No, ma'am, no questions.
Okay, then we class is over. Thank you very much, everyone.
मैम
जी yes.
क्विज जो है वो मंडे को है
I think Monday को ही decide हुआ था.
वेंसडे को है फिर
Wednesday को. Oh sorry, I think Wednesday को. Wednesday कहा था मैंने. अच्छा चले तो Wednesday को हो जाएगा कोई बात नहीं ठीक है Wednesday को ठीक है 12 o'clock टाइम याद है ना क्लास टाइम में 12 बजे.
ओके 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 मैम
हाँ ठीक है Wednesday था yes yes I got that Wednesday था yes we agreed upon on Wednesday 9th yes Wednesday 9th of
ओके
December.
मैम एंड फॉर्मेट क्या होगा क्विज का एमसीक्यूज एंड शॉर्ट क्वेश्चंस
Yes, MCQs and short questions. So, short questions ज़्यादा नहीं होंगे. Like 3 short questions, 2 marks each. I have decided, and 9 MCQs. 15 marks quiz will be there, and in 15 marks division is this that 3 short questions, 2 marks each. Short question means छोटा सा बस 2-3 lines का. And what will happen that you will see the question text, and below that will be a box in which you can type online.
ओके
It's not so. Or MCQs, so you already have an idea. MCQs will be you will have option on each page, one question on each page.
ओके थैंक यू मैम
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Ji. You can leave the meeting. Meeting time ends.
Allah Hafiz, ma'am.
Allah Hafiz.
लव इज
Allah Hafiz.